Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, just to recap today's shooting from video, we have posted by Nietzsche, and that looks like a bunch of an annotated a bunch of picture roll of the shooting that I think his name was Alex Preddy yesterday in Minnesota, and they have the Ice Agent 1 circle in blue, and it says Ice Agent 1 draws gun, and then they have the victim circle in red. Victim falls over dead. Then Ice Agent 1 points gun at dead guy. Victim is now dead. Ice Agent 2 draws gun on dead guy. Ice Agent 2 now shoots gun at dead guy. Victim still dead. And yeah, personally, I definitely don't think it was a very justified killing. But with that being said, I'm sure if it was a member of the outgroup, Reddit would think it's the greatest thing ever. You know, Reddit hates government authoritarianism, except when it came to COVID or when the January 6th police officer shot and killed Ashley Babbitt. You know, Reddit, as I said, like a lot of people, you know, Reddit, you know, and when I say Reddit, you know, I mean the majority of the website, you know, the Reddit hive mind pretty much, you know, obviously you can find exceptions if you look for them, but like 95% of Reddit's pretty much just like has the same exact mindset, it seems like, at least. And yeah, you know, the thing with that is, you know, like everyone wants everyone hates government authoritarianism, but you know, Reddit's gonna love government authoritarianism the second the Democrats take back the reins of the state. And it just goes to show you that a lot of people aren't principled libertarians. They're just principled. They just only see the world in red and blue. You know, a lot of people say it's always black and white, but you know, it's really red and blue these days. It's wherever they have a D next to their name or an R next to their name. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have the Party of Freedom, posted by Gen Z Gingy. I guess that means it's sarcasm. And that's a headline from Newsweek. It looks like kill switch for crawlers approved by House Republicans, full list. And yeah, you know, Thomas Massie, I think, was the one who's a Republican, who's really the one of the big ones against the kill switch. But just goes to show you that, you know, a lot of the Republicans are just controlled opposition. You know, Reddit might market them as an existential threat to democracy and our way of life, but in reality, you know, the two parties agree on pretty much everything, and they'll approve stuff like having government mandated kill switches in automobiles. You know, I personally think if the company wants to have a kill switch in there, I think that's fine. But I think if they're mandated to by the government, I don't think that's libertarian. If the government's forcing a private company to do anything, I don't think that's libertarian, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, guy never pulls his gun on these Republican government agents. One of them gets his gun just before first shot, posted by Fasty Ruviness 739, and that's cross-post from the anarcho-capitalism subreddit. And yeah, it's another clip of the Minnesota shooting that happened yesterday. And yeah, you know, personally, I don't think ICE should be killing people, but regardless, you know, law enforcement officers are always killing people for some reason or another, but Reddit only seems to care about it because ICE is their current biggest enemy, because, you know, it's associated with the Orange Man. You know, I'm sure if this wasn't ICE and just some regular cops, maybe they'd care about it. But, you know, since Ice Bad is pretty much Reddit's thing this year, you know, it's their most important story, and they won't shut up about it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Nazis surrounding the Capitol, posted by Boston 1345, and that's a cross post from the Austin Circle Jerk subreddit. And yeah, it looks like a bunch of Black Panthers or something, and one of them's giving a Nazi salute. And of course, the subreddit downvoted this one. You know, of course, when Elon gives a salute, Reddit thinks it's the worst thing ever, and they don't shut up about it. But when a Democratic politician or this Black Panther lady, it looks like, gives us the same salute, you know, Reddit thinks it's just a gesture. You know, it's not a Nazi salute. You know, it just goes to show you, Reddit doesn't really have any principles. You know, and you know, I remember during Mamdani's inauguration speech early in this month as mayor of New York, he kind of gave what looked like to be a Nazi salute, but Reddit didn't care, and it just goes to show you that, you know, Reddit only cares that what the outgroup does. The in-group can pretty much get away with anything. You know, but it just goes to show you, you know, it's, you know, make whatever gestures you want. If you want to think it's a Nazi salute, that's fine. But I definitely think when it comes to Reddit, you know, they only care what the politics of the person who's giving the salute is. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have ICE making list of anyone who films them from KenClippenstein.com, posted by MC Cufflinks. And yeah, personally, I don't think I should be making a list of anyone filming them, but the government can make any databases it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Aramark tells Yosemite workers it's axing most of their housing rights from sfgate.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, company towns are such a great idea, they'll find ever more clever ways to screw people over. In bold lettering, the policy specifics that the housing license agreement does not constitute a lease and defines the relationship between employee and Aramark as that of a licensor and licensee, as opposed to that of a tenant and landlord. This grants Aramark employees significantly less housing protections than those of a traditional renter. And yeah, personally, I don't think we should I don't think we should have company towns, especially if they're government contracted company towns at the national parks. But ultimately, people are going to justify what they justify. If people want to live in company towns, I think that's fine. But I think if Aramark and the government did work out something that was pretty much a company town for Aramark, that's ultimately how it is a lot of the time. Big government and big business colluding to make people dependent on them. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have looks like a Black Hat Blue Jeans agent is to open fire into his back while he was on the ground after his gun was removed. Posted by Fasty Rubenus 739, and that's a cross post from the anarcho-capitalism subreddit. And yeah, I don't really care for the shooting, as I said earlier, but it just goes to show you. And sure, if it was a member of the outgroup getting killed, Reddit would think it's the greatest thing ever. And yeah, I personally don't care for it, but yeah, it's my thoughts there, as I said earlier. Next, we have If This Isn't Oppression, I Don't Know What Is, posted by Helpful Feeding, and that's cross post from the Pics subreddit. And I think we already talked about this picture previously. I think it was posted here earlier. It's a nice observer being held down, sprayed in the face. Yeah, personally, I don't think that's good. But if Reddit, if it was some MAGA idiot under ISIS's knee or boot, Reddit would think it's the greatest thing ever, and it just goes to show they have no principles, only teams, and that's why Reddit can be very tiring. It's the same circle jerk over and over again. It's very much ideological masturbation. All social media is to some extent, but Reddit in particular, it's always, gee, aren't MAGA bad? It's like Reddit hates this dehumanization, but constantly dehumanizes anyone in the outgroup. It just goes to show you, they really have no principles other than in-group good, out-group bad. Next we have Ayatollah, please send help sign found in Minnesota after ICE militants execute unarmed civilian in a cry for help and desperately calling out their hypocrisy and depravity. Posted by Row Run Row, and that's a tweet from Jackson Inkle, breaking spot in Minnesota, and it's a sign that says Ayatollah, please send help. It looks like the subreddit didn't think that was legitimate. It's only at 40% upvoted. Jackson Hinkle is kind of a tanky communist sympathizer, and looks like he's simping for Iran here. But regardless, if he wants to post whatever he wants to post, whether it's actually there or not, I don't really care. Post whatever you feel like. I think that's very much a libertarian position. It might not be true, but misinformation needs to fall on its own terms. Government censorship of misinformation is not the answer. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Minnesota Department of Corrections launches new website to address ongoing misinformation by DHS, posted by Care11 posted by Ninja Lover, and this from Care11.com, and that's a cross post from the technology subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that, but ultimately, if another government agency is having problems with the government agency, and they want to make their own corrections to what that government agency said, I think they should be able to. But with that being said, no government's your friend, whether it be the federal government, the state government, or the local government for that matter. They all have their own interests, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have It's As If I Haven't Heard Them Rant About It for My Entire Life, posted by CH for Locks, and that's cross post from the political meme subreddit, and that looks like a meme from Forrest Gump, and it's a picture of Forrest Gump, and he says, just like that, conservatives forgot how the Second Amendment works. And yeah, I would agree with that, a lot of people on the right just view politics as in-group good, out-group bad as well. I do think, Alex Purdy had every right to carry a gun if he felt like it. And if the ICE felt threatened by it and wanted to justify shooting him, ultimately they should have been able to. But it's like a lot like Kyle Rittenhouse. When Kyle Rittenhouse was carrying a gun, the sides were reversed, and that just would show you that for a lot of people it's just in group good, out group bad. If someone's in group coded, they'll be allowed they are allowed to use the Second Amendment. If someone's out group coded, and suddenly the Second Amendment doesn't apply to them. In reality, I think the Libertarian position is that the Second Amendment is for everyone, regardless of their IQ or whatever disabilities or where they are, what race they are, etc., etc. Ultimately, everyone has the right to whatever weapons they can obtain, and that's my thoughts there. Next, we have AG Pam Bondi sent letter to Tim Walz after today's shooting demanding Minnesota voter roll data among other demands in exchange for ending ISIS siege from democracydocket.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the Law subreddit. And yeah, personally, that's very much how if the administration wants to demand Minnesota voter roll data, I think that's, they can justify demanding whatever they want to. But, ultimately, it just goes to show you that government's going to enforce whatever it feels like to get whatever it feels like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Pam Bondi offers to pull ICE out of Minneapolis if voter files handed over from Newsweek.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I don't think they should be doing that, but the government can justify doing whatever it feels like. If the people in charge want something and they have the social and economic capital to get it, oftentimes there's no way you can stop them. Next, we have Forget Acknowledging Land. How about we acknowledge taxpayers? Posted by Whippersnapper UT99, and that's a YouTube video from the Toronto Sun. Lily Unleashed. Forget acknowledging land. How about we acknowledge taxpayers? And yeah, personally, I think land acknowledgements are some of the woke progressive bullshit that is very tiresome at this point. I think we should be acknowledging the taxpayers who actually are paying them, rather than just I think the libertarian position is if you want to do a landing on it, that's fine. But I think the tax if you shouldn't have, maybe they shouldn't be a taxpayer funded events if the taxpayer doesn't want it. And that's my thoughts there. That's why I think in my libertarian world we would have voluntary taxation rather than forced taxation. And if people did want to land acknowledgement at their events and wanted to pay for I think they should be able to. But ultimately I think libertarian positions we shouldn't have government events in the first place unless people want to voluntarily fund them. Next, we have the current state of mainstream libertarianism, posted by Buzzleheaded Bird Bid 1579. That's crosspost from the Weird GOP subreddit. So-called libertarian doesn't think you should protest government. And that's a tweet from Jeremy Kaufman, who tweeted, "Watching some of these ICE videos started to make me fear for America. Could this happen to me or someone I love? Then I realized no one I like is stupid enough to protest ICE." And personally, I would somewhat agree with that. I don't really care for ICE, but if you're actively out protesting them, we'll comparing them to the Gestapo. If you think they're that dangerous, you probably shouldn't be out protesting them. But if you want to be out protesting ICE, and kind of irk them constantly. I personally, if I was an ICE agent, I'd probably have them loaded onto several people by now. Especially if it's pretty much like Reddit in real life, I would say. Reddit are constantly going, blah, 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 blah. And I personally think the ICE agents in Minnesota are showing remarkable restraint when it comes to not using the force of the state. If I had the force of the state on my side, I'd be going crazy. I'd probably have justified unloading on them quite a few times by now, I would say. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Occupy Democrats, posted by MondaneImage13. That's and that looks like a link to the Occupy Democrats Facebook page, and that's some posts they have, and it looks like a wall of text, so I'm not going to read it. But yeah, ultimately, if people want to share stuff from the Occupy Democrats, I think they're very much a partisan political organization, but that's very much what Reddit is at this point. It's the DNC propaganda hellhole. Next, we have FAA creates drone no-fly zone for ICE operations, and then parentheses time to build a fuckload of drones from Arrow Time That Arrow, posted by CH4Locks, and that's crosspost from the technology subreddit. And yeah, personally, I think that if ICE wants to build drones, I think they should be able to. But ultimately, I don't really care for drones of any kind. But you use whatever you want with the resources you have. That's very much the libertarian position. People are going to justify whatever they're going to justify in regards to their resources and capital that they have at any given moment, and that's my thoughts there. Next, we have resurfaced Charlie Kirk quote haunts MAGA after new DHS killing from RawStory.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the No Filter News subreddit. And yeah, personally, I think it's interesting that Reddit, when he was live, Reddit hated Charlie Kirk, but now they're using Charlie Kirk quotes to show that the hypocrisy of the GOP in regards to the DHS killing. It just goes to show Reddit has no principles. They hated the guy when he was live. They thought he was another Hitler. But, now that he's dead, suddenly they're using his quotes to fight against MAGA. It just goes to show Reddit's nothing more than, I don't really care for MAGA or the Republicans, but, Reddit is just the DNC propaganda hellhole, and it just kind of gets annoying after a while, if you ask me. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Rand Paul pretty quiet lately, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the Age Like Milk subreddit. And that's a tweet from Rand Paul at Judge Knapp. Why do we have a Second Amendment? It's not shoot deer, it's to shoot at the government when it becomes too tyrannical. And that's from June 23rd, 2016. And yeah, Rand Paul, sometimes I don't think he's been that quiet, but of course on Reddit, anyone right-coded, even if they're more libertarian-esque like Rand Paul, is going to be seen as an enemy. And that just goes to show you that, Reddit's just pretty, as I said, it's the DNC propaganda hellhole, and it just gets tiring after a while. Next we have MTG defends protester shot by DHS and says people need to lose their blinders. You are all being incited into civil war from independent.co.uk, posted by Ninja Lover. Personally I would agree with MTG there. People should just stop justifying a government authoritarianism once their side doing it. People are just I think people are tired of all the rage bait and constant outrage that social media has. Eventually you just kind of get numb to it all. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Trump administration goes after Second Amendment rights and justifying Minneapolis shooting from NBCNews.com, posted by CH4Locks. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for them going after Second Amendment rights, but Reddit was fine with Biden and Obama's administration going after Second Amendment rights. It just goes to show Reddit has no principles other than out-group good, out-group bad, in-group good. Next, we have ICE. We won't shoot and we'll leave if you all hand over all Minnesota voter rolls, posted by Ragnarok KXG, and that's crosspost from the news blog 72 subreddit. And that looks like a tweet from Senator Chris Murphy, it's Fred's post, sorry, but pretty much a tweet. Van Bonnie just sent a letter to Minnesota officials saying ICE will leave the state if the state turns over its voter database to Trump. Guess what? This has never been about safety immigration. It's pretext for Trump to take over elections in swing states. And yeah, personally, I think it's interesting when the Dems win elections, like in 2020, they say, oh, you can't question elections, that, our elections are safe and secure. But now that the orange man's back in power, suddenly they're saying, oh, we have to start questioning elections again. It just goes to show you, no principles, only teams. Next, we have Israeli bullet found in an Iranian child. Both a member of the left and the right discuss Netanyahu's desperation to draw America into a war, posted by Row, and that's a tweet from the Gray Zone. The Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal joined Matt Gaetz to detail the role of Israel's Mossad in fueling the violent riots that ravaged Iranian cities this month. Blumenthal warns Netanyahu is desperate for U.S. escalation against Iran, and that he actually seeks U.S. casualties. And that looks like a clip of them doing that, of them talking on One American News. And yeah, personally, the Gray Zone can be kind of conspiratorial, but, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Israel was involved in the U.S.'s, in the Iranian protests, the CIA as well. I definitely think that they want, the U.S. is definitely hungry for a regime change in Iran, and Israel is probably a big part of that, since Israel is Iran's chief geopolitical rival in the region, and, that definitely wouldn't surprise me. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And then I wanted to share a post I made to the Libertarian Party USA subreddit as well. I said, the greatest tragedy of the Trump era in regards to Reddit. I said, despite everything that's happened over the past decade, Reddit, before anyone says otherwise, when I say Reddit, I mean the great general consensus of the website, aka the hive mind. You can find exceptions if you look out for them. refuses to self-reflect on why Trump managed to get elected not once but twice, and continues to double down censoring anyone who goes against the official narrative whatsoever. I was on the subreddit for my local big city this morning. It's self-installed the main one after it got too censorship happy, and they were celebrating with some user IDK who probably some right-wing troll had deleted their account, so I replied with something along the lines of, can always count Reddit when it comes to supporting censoring wrongthink, lol. The mods then proved me right by removing my comment and banning me from the subreddit essentially for wrongthink. It's apparently the rule about no spending for fascist support / for fascist and democratic principles, but of course Reddit labels any sin at all as those anyway. I'm a guy who's never voted for Trump in any of these free elections, but his website honestly makes me wish I had voted for him all 3 times. It's that insufferable, and he's only to keep getting more insufferable with each passing year. And it's honestly probably costing the Democrats elections at this point. And yeah, personally, I think, if I'm the Democrats, I would probably push to get Reddit banned. It might be seen as anti-free speech, and I would say it definitely is. But, I think that's the Republicans and Democrats could probably agree on that, right? It's just the echo chamber. So all social media is an echo chamber, but it's a particularly bad echo chamber that, I personally, as Libertarian, would be against it being banned. But, it would be more than justified at this point since it's pretty much progressive Al-Qaeda.com, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.